In this exclusive coverage, we explore the extraordinary funeral arrangements for Pope Francis and the unexpected choices he made in his final will. The 88-year-old pontiff's passing has sparked a momentous transition for the Catholic Church as cardinals gather from across the globe to prepare for selecting his successor. The humble Pope's final journey. Pope Francis, known throughout his papacy for his understated approach to papal traditions, continues this legacy even in death. Breaking with centuries of tradition, Francis chose not to be buried beneath St. Peter's Basilica like most of his predecessors, but instead requested his final resting place be at the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major. Throughout my life and during my ministry as a priest and bishop, I've always entrusted myself to the Mother of our Lord, the Blessed Virgin Mary, Francis wrote in his will from 2022. For this reason, I ask that my mortal remains rest awaiting the day of resurrection in the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major. This marks the first time in over a century that a pope will not be buried at the Vatican. Francis specifically requested a simple ground tomb without ornamentation bearing only the inscription Franciscus. Public viewing and funeral preparations. Despite early questions about whether Francis had requested no public viewing of his remains, Vatican officials have arranged for his body to lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica. The public will have the opportunity to pay their respects before Saturday's funeral. Initial images released by Vatican media showed Francis in an open casket in the chapel of Dama Santa Mara, where Vatican officials and members of the papal household held a private viewing. His body will be transferred to St. Peter's Basilica for public viewing until the funeral mass on Saturday morning. The funeral and world leaders Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, Dean of the College of Cardinals, will preside over the funeral mass on Saturday at 10 o'clock a.m. local time. World leaders are expected to attend, including President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. Prince William will represent King Charles III, who had met with Pope Francis just weeks before the pontiff's death. Unlike the elaborate papal funerals of the past, Francis requested a more modest ceremony. However, as theologian Matthew Patrick explains, this focus on humility isn't unprecedented. Pope St. John Paul II had all the fanfare of the papal funeral, but he chose a simple pine wooden box. The coffin for St. John Paul II was much simpler even than Francis's coffin now. The conclave process for selecting a new pope has already begun, with about 60 cardinals meeting in Rome to discuss next steps. More cardinals are arriving daily, including Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Archbishop of New York. The actual conclave to elect the next pope will begin within 15-20 days and will be conducted in complete secrecy. For a cardinal to be elected pope, he must receive 2/3 of the votes from the eligible cardinals. The likelihood is relatively low that any given pope becomes a saint, noted Patrick when asked about Francis's potential canonization. The process for becoming a saint is usually decades if not centuries in the making, and relatively few popes over the 2,000 years of the Church's history have actually gone through that entire process. A church in mourning. Churches worldwide have begun displaying signs of mourning. At St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, black bunting has been placed above the doors. The Empire State Building illuminated in gold and white lights to honor the late pontiff, while flags fly at half-staff by presidential order. He was a true apostle of God's mercy, Cardinal Dolan said of Francis during a mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Comfortable enough with us, his family, to let us see his weakness, his fragility, his stumbling in a wheelchair with his oxygen tube, confident enough to let us see his struggle. What this means for the Catholic Church. Francis' death marks not just the end of an individual papacy but a significant moment of transition for the Catholic Church. His final choices, particularly regarding his burial location, reflect his lifelong devotion to Mary and his commitment to humility that defined his papacy. As the Catholic Church prepares to select its next leader, Francis's legacy of simplicity and accessibility will undoubtedly influence discussions about the future direction of the global faith community. What's next? The world's attention now turns to Saturday's funeral and the subsequent conclave. Which cardinal will emerge as the next pope? Will the next pontiff continue Francis's reformist agenda or chart a different course? Don't miss our continued coverage of this historic transition. Share your thoughts in the comments below on Pope Francis's legacy and what you hope to see in the next papacy. Subscribe to our channel for complete coverage of Saturday's funeral and all developments in the selection of the next pope.